You want to put what in the diplomatic banquet dishes?
Chief Culinary Ambassador Zixtel's respiratory membranes fluttered in alarm, all four of his eyes blinking asynchronously. I held up the small red pepper between my thumb and forefinger.
It's just a jalapeno. One of our milder varieties, actually.
Milder?
The Vexlorian's translucent skin flushed a deep purple.
Human Jenkins, that contains capsaicin. It's classified as a defensive neurotoxin in 7 sectors.
This was my 3rd week as Earth's first chef at the Galactic Culinary Federation headquarters, and I was already regretting taking the position. When humanity made first contact 5 years ago, we'd learned that most sentient species had evolved in environments with remarkably similar biochemistry. We could eat each other's food, mostly, but the differences were significant.
Ambassador, I understand your concerns, but capsaicin is completely safe for humans. We've been eating it for thousands of years.
As some sort of tribal initiation ritual?
He asked, genuinely curious now.
No, for pleasure. It adds complexity to the flavor experience.
The ambassador's translator must have glitched because he stared at me for 14 uncomfortable seconds before responding.
You consume a pain-inducing compound for pleasure.
Well, when you put it that way.
Attention all personnel.
The station's AI announced.
Toxin alert in Culinary Sector 7. Please evacuate immediately.
I sighed as the decontamination protocols engaged around my little pepper. This was going to be harder than I thought. I grew up in my grandmother's restaurant in New Mexico. Abuela Sofia was famous for her chile rellenos and 5-alarm pozole that brought tears to grown men's eyes.
The burn is how you know you're alive,
she'd say, watching customers fan their mouths. Now, standing in my sterile quarters aboard Proxima Station as the security team confiscated my spice collection, my contraband, I wondered what Abuela would think of aliens who'd never experienced the pleasure pain of a good hot sauce. Admiral Corix had summoned me to her office after the jalapeno incident. The angular Tressian regarded me with what I'd come to recognize as their version of exasperation.
Chef Jenkins, I understand cultural exchange is the purpose of your assignment, but perhaps we should focus on less controversial human foods.
She gestured to a holographic display of Earth cuisine.
These hamburgers seem benign enough.
With all due respect, Admiral, spices are fundamental to human culinary heritage. Earth's entire history was shaped by the spice trade. Nations rose and fell over access to pepper and cardamom.
I leaned forward.
And capsaicin represents something uniquely human. Our ability to transform defense mechanisms into pleasure.
The Admiral's head crest fluttered skeptically.
An unusual evolutionary adaptation.
Not adaptation. Choice.
I tapped my temple.
We didn't evolve to enjoy capsaicin. We chose to appreciate it despite its effects. That's the essence of human cuisine. Finding beauty in the challenging.
The Admiral studied me with multifaceted eyes.
You're passionate about this.
It's who we are. Across Earth, spicy food isn't just nutrition. It's identity, community, celebration. From Thai street vendors to Mexican grandmothers to Indian wedding feasts, heat connects us.
I paused.
How can I represent Earth's culinary traditions without it?
Admiral Corix was silent for a long moment.
I'll permit a controlled demonstration, but there will be medical supervision, and participation must be strictly voluntary.
I grinned.
That's all I need.
My friend Lara from xenobiology helped me prepare for the demonstration. We sat in her lab, surrounded by models of different species' sensory systems.
You need to understand,
she explained, manipulating a hologram of alien taste receptors.
Most species evolved taste primarily as danger detection. Only Earth's unusual conditions and human stubbornness led to our complex relationship with painful foods.
So capsaicin affects them differently?
Not exactly. It triggers the same pain receptors, but their brains haven't learned to separate the sensation from actual danger.
She projected a comparative neural map.
See how the human brain has these pathways connecting pain to reward centers? That's uniquely terrestrial and mostly human. Even dogs and cats don't enjoy spicy food.
I thought about this.
So I'm not just introducing them to a new flavor. I'm asking them to rewire how they interpret sensations.
Precisely.
Lara manipulated the display.
The Mizari might adapt quickly. Their crystalline neural structures are highly plastic. The Vexlorians will struggle. Their entire biological response system is geared toward immediate threat assessment.
What about the culinary? They're hosting the culinary summit next month.
Lara's expression turned thoughtful.
Fascinating case. They have multiple digestive systems. Their primary stomach might reject capsaicin, but their secondary might process it differently. You could try targeting that digestive pathway.
For weeks, I experimented in the small kitchen they'd finally cleared for me. I studied alien digestive charts and sensory responses, adjusting recipes to each species' physiology. I created capsaicin delivery systems that would maximize flavor while minimizing shock. Peppers suspended in fat-based emulsions for species that processed lipids slowly, giving them time to acclimate. Molecular gastronomy techniques that encapsulated tiny amounts of heat in dissolving shells for gradual release. It was the most challenging cooking I'd ever done, but also the most important. I wasn't just preparing food, I was translating humanity. 3 months after the jalapeno incident, I stood before the Federation Culinary High Council. After several mishaps, the Great Sriracha evacuation of 2218 was still mentioned in hushed tones. I had finally secured permission for a controlled tasting event.
The Council recognizes Chef Sophia Jenkins of Earth,
intoned High Counselor Gaffna, her gelatinous form rippling with pompous authority.
You may proceed with your demonstration.
I'd prepared simple dishes, a mild chili, patatas bravas, and a green curry that wouldn't make a human child flinch. For my test subjects, I had one brave volunteer from each of the Federation's 12 founding species.
Before we begin,
I announced,
I've integrated specialized synthetic enzymes that will neutralize the capsaicin within 10 seconds of consumption if the sensation proves overwhelming.
The Arcturian representative's tentacles curled anxiously.
And you consume this without such protection.
We consider that part of the experience,
I said with a smile. The tasting began tentatively. The Mizari representative went first, dabbing a microscopic amount of chili onto his proboscis. The reaction was instantaneous and electric. His crystalline exoskeleton flashed in rapid pulses of light, their species equivalent of gasping.
It burns, but it does not harm.
He sounded bewildered.
The pain signals activate, yet my tissue remains undamaged.
Exactly,
I explained.
The sensation triggers endorphins, natural pleasure chemicals in many species. For humans, it creates a complex interplay of pain and pleasure.
One by one, they tried the foods. Reactions varied wildly. The Vex ambassador's skin cycled through 17 colors. A Tellurian monk levitated 3 feet off her chair in shock. The Quillari representative made sounds that caused the universal translators to short out temporarily. But not one of them used the neutralizing enzyme.
It's confusing,
admitted Counselor Gaffna after trying the curry.
My sensory apparatus indicates danger, yet my analytical centers register new flavor dimensions I've never experienced. It's like tasting a new color.
That's exactly what makes it special,
I said, feeling a surge of hope.
Capsaicin creates tension in the flavor profile. That tension and its resolution is what humans find satisfying.
A culinary paradox.
Mused the Hadronian philosopher chef.
Pain that is not pain. Danger that is not dangerous.
By the end of the session, they were comparing notes excitedly, describing the experience in terms their languages had never needed before. The next morning, my comm unit woke me at an ungodly hour. It was Zix Tell, the Vexlorian ambassador who'd initially triggered the jalapeno evacuation.
Human Jenkins, I require more of the green substance immediately.
I blinked sleep from my eyes.
Ambassador, are you okay?
I am experiencing what your notes described as craving. Most unusual. My nutritional needs are fully met, yet I desire more of the green curry specifically.
I laughed.
That's normal, Ambassador. It's called developing a taste for something.
Fascinating. The courier manifest to Vexlor leaves in 3 hours. I must bring samples to our culinary ministry. They won't believe this without evidence.
Word spread faster than I'd anticipated. Within days, I was fielding requests from diplomatic missions across the station. The Arcturian ambassador requested that red paste with the smokiness, chipotle, for a cultural exchange dinner. A Mizari crystal artisan asked if I could create a spice blend complementing their traditional mineral broths. Not everyone was enthusiastic. The station's medical director, Dr. Talek, summoned me for what she called a consultation, but felt more like an interrogation.
These substances have no documented long-term effects on non-human physiology,
she said sternly, her feline ears flattened against her skull.
You're experimenting on government officials.
With their enthusiastic consent.
I countered.
And we're monitoring everyone carefully.
The Hadronian ambassador was hiccuping plasma discharges this morning.
That's actually a sign of pleasure in their species. Ambassador Call explained it's similar to their post-mating glow.
Dr. Talek's tail twitched.
That's not reassuring.
Despite the medical department's concerns, the Galactic Culinary Federation officially approved capsaicin for interspecies consumption the following week, with appropriate warning labels. I was granted permission to open a small demonstration kitchen, where interested diplomats could experience Earth cuisines safely. The kitchen became the station's most popular attraction. Species that had evolved on different planets, never meant to share meals together, gathered around my tables to experience something new. They came for the novelty, but returned for the communal experience, the shared adventure of tasting something challenging together. It reminded me of Abuela's restaurant, where strangers became friends over bowls of spicy pozole, daring each other to take another bite, laughing through the tears. The invitation to cook at the Quilari Culinary Summit came 6 months later. It was unprecedented. No species newly admitted to the Federation had ever been featured at the prestigious gathering. The summit showcased the galaxy's finest gastronomic achievements, techniques refined over thousands of years.
They're calling you the toxin whisperer,
my assistant Drix informed me, his antennae twitching with amusement as he scrolled through the interstellar news feeds.
Charming,
I muttered, packing my knives, real metal ones, a rarity in space.
Any updates on the import approval for the ghost peppers?
Still pending. The Quilari Ministry of Biological Security is concerned about potential environmental contamination.
Drix passed me a data pad.
But they've approved everything else, including the Szechuan peppercorns, which technically contain a different neurotoxin.
Hydroxy-alpha-sanchul,
I nodded.
Causes numbing rather than burning. Perfect for the second course.
When we arrived on Quilar, I was astonished by the planet's beauty. Floating cities suspended above vast oceans, connected by transport beams that looked like strands of light. The Quilari, with their iridescent tentacular lower bodies and humanoid torsos, moved through water and air with equal grace. The summit was held in the Grand Floating Pavilion, an enormous transparent dome where the planet's 3 moons would be visible during the final dinner service. 200 of the galaxy's most renowned chefs were participating, each with their own presentation kitchen. Mine was situated between a Mizari crystalline gastronomy specialist and a Vexlorian biochemical harmonizer. Both nodded respectfully as I unpacked my humble earth ingredients, plants mostly, and dried spices that had once been common enough to find in any Earth market, but now represented humanity's unique contribution to galactic cuisine. The summit opened with a speech from Grand Culinarian Thexla, the Quilari's most celebrated food philosopher.
Gastronomy is our oldest universal language,
she intoned, her voice melodic.
Before we could speak to one another, we could taste each other's worlds. Through food, we first began to understand that different does not mean wrong, merely another path to nourishment, pleasure, and communion.
She gestured toward the earth section with a graceful sweep of tentacles.
Today, we welcome humanity's unique perspective, a species that challenged our most fundamental assumptions about what food can be, reminding us that growth often begins with discomfort. Let their courage inspire us all to taste beyond our boundaries.
I hadn't expected such an endorsement, and felt a swell of pride as curious chefs drifted toward my station. For 3 days, I demonstrated Earth's spicy culinary traditions, from the subtle heat of North African harissa to the complex burn of Thai bird chilies to the fruity punch of Jamaican Scotch bonnets. The highlight came during my presentation on historical spice trade routes of Earth, when I prepared 5 distinct curry traditions from different Earth regions, explaining how geography, conquest, trade, and cultural exchange had shaped each recipe.
Humans fought wars over these flavors.
I explained to the captivated audience.
Explorations that mapped our planet were launched in search of spice routes. Our global economy, even our understanding of different cultures, was built around the pursuit of these sensations.
A dignified Hadronian raised a glowing appendage.
But surely the physiological discomfort was initially a deterrent. What prompted the first human to persist past the pain?
I considered this.
We don't know for certain, but humans have always been defined by curiosity overriding caution. Someone, thousands of years ago, must have taken a second bite despite the burn, recognizing that beneath the pain lay something worth pursuing.
I smiled.
If there's a more human characteristic than that, I don't know what it is.
The final night of the summit featured a collaborative dinner. Each featured chef would prepare one course, together creating a journey through the galaxy's cuisines. I had been assigned the 5th course, traditionally the most challenging position in the progression. I'd spent weeks developing my dish.
Earth's 5 regions of heat.
It featured 5 small composed bites, each showcasing a different manifestation of capsaicin and complementary flavors. Szechuan mala prawns, with numbing peppercorns, smoky Mexican mole with fruity undertones, fiery Thai relish tempered with sweet coconut, Indian vindaloo with warming spices, and Korean gochujang with fermented depth. As I plated the final dish for the 200 distinguished guests, I felt a moment of doubt. Perhaps it was too aggressive for a galaxy still acclimating to spice. Maybe I was pushing too hard, too fast. Then I remembered Abuela Sofia in her kitchen, watching with pride as newcomers experienced her food for the first time.
Food should comfort,
She'd say.
but sometimes it should also challenge. That's how we grow.
The plates went out. I watched from the kitchen doorway as 200 beings from across the galaxy experienced Earth's capsaicin diversity. There were gasps, flashing lights, color changes, vibrational responses, and not a single plate returned untouched. When the dinner concluded, Grand Culinarian Thexla glided to the center of the pavilion, her tentacles arranged in what I now recognized as an expression of deep satisfaction.
Throughout my 3 centuries of culinary exploration,
She began.
I have rarely experienced true revelation, a taste that fundamentally alters my understanding of what food can be.
She gestured toward me.
Tonight, Chef Jenkins has given us not merely new flavors, but a new philosophy. The human approach to capsaicin teaches us that discomfort and pleasure need not be opposites, but can instead be harmonious aspects of a singular experience.
The Grand Culinarian raised a ceremonial chalice.
To humanity, who reminds us that sometimes we must burn to grow.
1 year later, I walked through the Galactic Culinary District on Proxima Station. What had once been a sterile hall of predictable flavors had transformed. Restaurants now proudly displayed human-inspired heat ratings. A prestigious Mizrahi chef had created a capsaicin-infused crystalline dessert that had a 3-month waiting list. My own restaurant, Paradox, had become the most coveted reservation in 3 sectors. Tonight, I was preparing a special tasting menu for the High Council.
Chef Jenkins!
A familiar voice called out. Ambassador Zixtel approached, his skin glowing a content amber.
I've been cultivating these for you.
He handed me a small container. Inside were what looked like ghostly blue peppers.
Vexlorian fire pods.
He explained proudly.
We've discovered that our planet has capsaicin analogs that evolved independently. These were considered inedible toxins, but now...
He beamed.
My cousin has become our first capsaicin culinary specialist.
I felt a surge of emotion.
You're exploring your own spicy ingredients now?
Indeed, and we've discovered something remarkable. The culinary have similar compounds, as do the hadronians. Each has subtle differences in how they trigger sensory responses.
That night, as I prepared the council's meal, I incorporated Zixtel's fire pods into a fusion dish. The blue pods had a different heat profile, more lingering, with notes that reminded me of smoked paprika, but with an alien twist that tasted like, well, like nothing on Earth. After service, I joined the diners. The council table was buzzing with conversation about a newly discovered sector whose dominant species had evolved to consume corrosive metals.
Completely incompatible with Federation digestive systems,
Councillor Gaffna was explaining.
We assumed cultural exchange would be impossible.
Until 3 days ago,
Added a Mizrahi representative, crystal skin pulsing with excitement.
when they expressed interest in capsaicin after learning about human consumption practices. If humans can find pleasure in pain, perhaps we can find a way to share experiences with metal eaters.
To the paradox of pleasure.
Toasted High Councillor Gaffna, raising her glass to me.
And to humanity's strange evolutionary quirk that has created a culinary revolution.
I raised my glass in return, thinking of all the Earth grandmothers, street vendors, and family cooks who had preserved these traditions across generations.
To finding common ground in our differences.
As I watched the various beings enjoying their meals, some sweating, some glowing, some vibrating slightly, I thought about how something as simple as our tolerance for a defensive plant compound had created this unexpected bridge between species. Later that evening, as the restaurant quieted, I received a transmission from Earth, from my grandmother's restaurant, now run by my cousin. She'd sent images of their latest menu edition, Galactic Fusion Night, featuring dishes inspired by my interstellar collaborations. Their most popular item was a Vexlorian fire pod salsa that had humans lining up around the block. Perhaps our human peculiarities weren't just biological accidents, but windows into new experiences. Maybe there were other human oddities: our love of bitter chocolate, our enjoyment of sour foods, our strange fascination with carbonation that made our drinks hurt in a pleasant way, that might similarly transform galactic culture. The Mizrahi representative approached me after dinner, crystal skin still pulsing with excitement.
Chef Jenkins, we have been reviewing human biochemistry. Is it true that you also deliberately consume ethanol to temporarily impair your neural functions for recreation?
I smiled, already imagining Admiral Corix's face during the inevitable, controlled demonstration of cocktail hour.
That,
I said,
will be a conversation for another day.
2 years after the Culinary Summit, I received the Federation's highest gastronomic honor, induction into the Culinary Hall of Legends, the first human to achieve this distinction. The ceremony was held on Earth in my grandmother's restaurant in New Mexico, now expanded to accommodate alien visitors and retrofitted with atmosphere adapters for non-oxygen breathers. Abuela Sofia, now 96, sat in the place of honor. She'd insisted on cooking her famous 5-alarm pozole for the distinguished alien guests, each of whom now wore the small golden pin that designated them as capsaicin adapted. As I accepted the Crystalline Award from Grand Culinarian Thexla, I thought about how spice had connected us across the stars, just as it had once connected continents on Earth.
The true power of cuisine isn't in nutrition or even pleasure.
I said in my acceptance speech.
It's in its ability to transform how we understand each other. When you taste food from another world, whether that world is across the galaxy or just across a border, you experience another perspective. You learn that different isn't wrong. It's just another way of being alive.
Later, as alien diplomats and human family gathered around my grandmother's tables, sharing stories and comparing their capsaicin tolerance, I watched Abuela Sofia teaching a young Vexplorian how to properly toast chilies to bring out their smoky depth.
The burn is how you know you're alive,
she told him, just as she told me decades ago. His translucent skin glowed with delight as he repeated her words. In that moment, I understood that we'd given the galaxy more than a new flavor experience. We'd shared a piece of human philosophy, that sometimes the most meaningful experiences come with a little bit of pain, that growth often begins with discomfort, and that joining others in that journey, whether around a family table or a galactic summit, is what makes us all part of the same story.
Chef's note, Sophia Jenkins went on to win the prestigious Golden Spatula Award 5 years running, becoming the first human to be inducted into the Galactic Culinary Hall of Fame. Her influence led to the popular cross-species sensation movement in cooking, which explored how different evolutionary adaptations created unique culinary experiences. Earth became a prime culinary tourism destination, with aliens braving gravity discomfort just to experience authentic human spiciness in its birthplace. Capsaicin-based cuisine became so popular that the Federation reclassified the compound from toxin to xenogastronomic flavor enhancer in the official Galactic Substance Registry. The Jenkins principle, that physiological discomfort could be culturally reimagined as pleasure, revolutionized not just galactic gastronomy, but interspecies cultural exchange across all sensory domains. Her memoir, The Toxin Whisperer, How Chili Peppers Saved Galactic Diplomacy, became standard reading in both culinary academies and diplomatic training programs throughout the known universe.